Some countries are defined by their oceans, some by their great rivers. But Austria is defined by being at the absolute heart of it all. It's a place that, for centuries, has been the crossroads of empires, a stage for geniuses, and a canvas for some of the world's most stunning art. This isn't just a nation, it's a living library of history, where every cobblestone has a story, and every mountain peak holds a secret. From the emperors, who ruled an empire with weddings instead of wars, to the artists who changed the way we see the world, get ready to discover the magic that makes Austria, well, Austria. Believe it or not, people were living in the fertile valleys of what is now Austria as far back as the Stone Age. But the real story kicks into gear around 400 BC when Celtic peoples moved in. They were pretty advanced, especially when it came to working with iron. In fact, a major Celtic civilization called Noricum was so good at it that it became a key trading partner with the Roman Empire. And speaking of the Romans, they decided to come for a visit around 200 BC and never really left. By 15 BC, they had taken over the whole area. They built huge fortifications along the Danube River, and their most important settlement, Carnuntum, became a major Roman city. You can even visit an archaeology park there today and walk through what's left of an ancient amphitheatre. Fast forward a few hundred years, and the Roman Empire was starting to crumble. Different Germanic tribes moved in and took control. And by the 800s, a powerful king named Charlemagne had established a new territory in the Danube Valley. He called it the Ostmark, which just means Eastern March or Eastern Border. It wasn't until a couple of hundred years later, in 996, that a document first used the name Ostarrîchi, which in turn set the stage for a new era. Because the year 976 marked the beginning of a new chapter when a powerful family, the Babenbergs, took control of the Ostmark and began expanding their territory. They were a pretty big deal too. They moved their main residence a couple of times before finally settling in Vienna in the 12th century. And ever since, Vienna has been the capital. It was during this time that the iconic St. Stephen's Cathedral was built, which still stands tall today. But the Babenberg family line eventually ran out of heirs, which opened the door for a new dynasty, the Habsburgs. So, in 1282, Rudolf I became the ruler, kicking off what would become an incredible 600-year reign for the Habsburg family. One thing that's unique about their reign is that they weren't always focused on war. In fact, they became famous for expanding their power through clever marriages. There's even an old saying about them that goes, "Let others make war, you, fortunate Austria, marry." And let's just say this strategy worked incredibly well. Through a series of brilliant marriages, the Habsburgs ended up inheriting huge parts of Europe, including Spain and its vast empire. But the 16th and 17th centuries were a time of great conflict, especially with the Ottoman Empire. The Turks even laid siege to Vienna twice, but both times the city held strong. With the Turkish threat finally gone, it was like a creative dam burst. This period, known as the Baroque era, saw a massive boom in art and architecture. I'm talking about stunning palaces like Schönbrunn Palace were built, and Vienna became a hub of incredible artists, architects and composers. During this time, the Habsburgs continued to lead, with one of the most famous rulers being Empress Maria Theresa, who made big changes to modernise the country. But the 1800s brought new challenges. The ideas of the French Revolution spread, and with Napoleon on the rise, the Habsburgs were seriously threatened. After Napoleon's defeat, a major meeting called the Congress of Vienna was held to sort out the map of Europe, meaning the people of Austria faced strict rules and censorship. As a result, people turned inward, focusing on home life and art, and it became a period known as Biedermeier. However, as the country industrialised and a new middle class emerged, art and social life flourished once more. This was the time of the legendary composer Franz Schubert, and as Vienna became one of Europe's most important metropolises, it was also shaped by Emperor Franz Joseph I and his beloved wife Sisi, whose 68-year reign was one of the longest in history. This wasn't just a political golden age, though. It was a time of immense intellectual and artistic breakthroughs, with people like Sigmund Freud founding modern psychology, and incredible painters like Gustav Klimt and Egon Schiele pioneering the stunning Art Nouveau movement. But this beautiful, grand era wouldn't last forever, because the 20th century was, to put it mildly, a roller coaster. Tensions between different groups in Europe finally exploded with the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in 1914, which triggered World War I. When the war ended in 1918, the Habsburg dynasty finally came to an end after 640 years, and the First Republic of Austria was born. The new republic had a tough time, struggling with huge economic problems, which made it vulnerable. This led to a dark period in 1938 when German troops marched into the country, incorporating Austria into the German Reich. After the end of World War II in 1945, the country was occupied by the US, the Soviet Union, the UK, and France for 10 long years. But everything changed in 1955 when the Austrian State Treaty was signed. Austria declared itself permanently neutral, which was a huge deal. Thanks to its location right next to the Iron Curtain during the Cold War, Austria became a crucial bridge between Western and Eastern Europe, welcoming countless refugees and hosting many international organisations. Alright, so we've travelled through time, but now it's time to talk about the place itself. So, you know how some countries just feel like they're at the centre of everything? That's definitely Austria. It's a landlocked country, kind of like a central hub in the middle of Europe, surrounded by 8 different neighbours: Germany, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Slovenia, Italy, Switzerland, and Liechtenstein. Now, when you picture Austria, what's the first thing that comes to mind? For most people, it's the mountains, right? And for good reason. The Eastern Alps dominate about 60% of the country's landscape. These mountains are absolutely massive, with some peaks soaring to incredible heights. Take the Grossglockner, for example. It's Austria's highest mountain, reaching a respectable 12,460 feet, or 3,798 metres. Because of all these mountains, Austria is a world-famous winter sports destination, a true paradise for anyone who loves to ski or snowboard. But it's not all snow and peaks. Just like the country's history, its geography is a mix of different landscapes. Over in the west you have Tyrol, a province famous for its snow-covered mountains, and Vorarlberg, which feels a lot like Switzerland. This region is home to Lake Constance, or the Bodensee, a huge and deep lake that's over 200 square miles, or about 538 square kilometres. And did you know, before a tunnel was built in 1978, this part of the country was basically cut off from the rest of Austria during the winter. Moving toward the centre of the country, you hit the province of Salzburg, the birthplace of Mozart, with its beautiful lakes and charming small towns. And in the south you'll find Carinthia, an alpine province with over 2,000 lakes, making it a perfect summer destination. Now, if you travel to the north and east, the landscape starts to change. The mountains give way to rolling hills and large flat plains. This is where you'll find the biggest concentration of people. But don't let that fool you. Much of the countryside is still unspoiled woodland. In fact, over 2/5 of Austria is covered in forests, making it one of the most densely forested countries in Central Europe. The star of this region, though, is without a doubt the Danube River. It's the second longest river in Europe, flowing for a staggering 1,770 miles, or 2,849 kilometres, all the way from Germany to the Black Sea. It's been a major highway for trade and travel for thousands of years, and is still incredibly important for connecting Eastern and Western Europe. And what about the weather? Well, Austria's climate is as varied as its landscape. In the west, it's more of an Atlantic climate, with more rainfall and humidity. Then, as you move east, it becomes more continental, with hotter summers and colder winters. So you can be hiking in the Alps in the cool summer air one day, and then soaking up the sunshine by one of the many lakes in the warmer south a few days later. So now you're probably wondering, what does it take to run a country like this in the modern world? Well, that brings us to the fascinating story of its politics and economy. Austria's economy is generally considered one of the most stable in Europe. The country has a high standard of living, and its GDP per capita is among the highest on the continent, estimated at over $61,000 in 2025. It's a country that relies on a strong network of small and medium-sized businesses that are very focused on exports. It's also a highly open economy, meaning it trades a lot with its neighbours, and about 2/3 of that trade happens right within the European Union. In 2024, the country's total GDP was over $521 billion. But even a strong economy has its ups and downs. For the last couple of years, Austria has faced a few economic headwinds. In 2023 and 2024, the country experienced a recession, which means its economy was actually shrinking. This was largely due to things like high energy costs, which made it harder for companies to compete, and a slowdown in exports to key markets, especially within Europe. Looking ahead, though, things are starting to look up, because while the economy is still projected to decline slightly in 2025 by about 0.3%, forecasters expect a return to growth in 2026, with the economy growing by a modest 1%. A big reason for this is that people are starting to spend more money. When it comes to prices, inflation has been a bit of a challenge recently. After a high of 7.7% in 2023, it fell to around 3% in 2024. But in early 2025, prices jumped up again, with inflation reaching 3.3% in the first quarter, mostly because some energy relief measures expired. Luckily, experts predict that inflation will continue to ease over the next couple of years, with some projections putting it as low as 2.1% by 2026. Now, you might think a recession would cause a lot of job losses, but Austria's labour market has held up remarkably well. Compared to other Eurozone countries, Austria's unemployment rate is quite low. It's been slowly rising from a low of 4.8% in 2022 to an expected 5.3% in 2025, but it's still far from the high levels seen elsewhere in the past. This is helped by the fact that the country's working age population is actually starting to decline, and the government is working to get more people into the workforce, especially by raising the retirement age for women to match that of men by 2033. And all of this economic action takes place against a backdrop of a shifting political landscape. The current government is a coalition between the centre-right People's Party and the Greens, but it's not popular. A new election is coming up, and polls show that the far-right Freedom Party is gaining a lot of support. While they've talked about big changes like cutting immigration, the reality is that any new government would likely be a coalition, so we probably won't see any super radical shifts in policy. Overall, Austria's economy and political scene are like a calm, stable boat riding through some choppy waters. The country is well prepared, but it's still facing some big challenges. And this is where the people and culture come into play. So, at the heart of everything is the family. For Austrians, the family unit is the basis of social life. They're generally small, but because of a history of staying in one place, they are often incredibly close-knit. Weekends are usually for getting outside and enjoying nature, whether it's a walk through a beautiful park or a hike in the countryside. And when the day is done, it's a tradition to gather for a big family dinner, with Sundays usually reserved for visiting grandparents. It's this cosy, family-first mindset that makes the Austrian home a very special place. Besides this, it's impossible to talk about Austrian culture without talking about its monumental contributions to the arts. This is where Austria's more reserved nature gives way to an explosion of creativity. For centuries, Vienna has been a magnet for some of the greatest musical minds in history. It was here that composers like native son Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart and adopted Austrians like Ludwig van Beethoven found the support and inspiration to create some of the most beautiful music in the world. They defined an entire era of classical music, and the country's musical legacy didn't stop there. Franz Schubert gave us countless beautiful melodies, and the Strauss family turned the waltz into an international phenomenon. Not only that, but figures like Gustav Mahler and the Second Viennese School pushed music into the modern age. Today you can experience this history at legendary institutions like the Vienna State Opera and hear the world-famous Vienna Philharmonic and the Vienna Boys Choir. But the artistic genius of Austria isn't limited to music. In the literary world, the great epic of the German Middle Ages, the Nibelungenlied, was written right here. The turn of the 20th century saw a flowering of literary talent with writers like Arthur Schnitzler and Hugo von Hofmannsthal, who perfectly captured the spirit of the time. This tradition of powerful storytelling continues today, with writers like Elfriede Jelinek, who won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 2004. Now moving on to the world of art and architecture, the Vienna Secession movement, led by the painter Gustav Klimt, broke away from traditional styles to create something new and breathtaking. You can see their influence in the stunning works of artists like Egon Schiele, whose emotional, vibrant art still captivates people today. And while Hollywood may seem a world away, a number of Austrian actors have made their mark there, from the legendary Hedy Lamarr to the one and only Arnold Schwarzenegger. a figure who perfectly represents that blend of Austrian identity and global fame. Ultimately, Austria's culture is like one of its grand, historic cities. It may seem formal and reserved on the outside, but inside, it's filled with a passion for family and an artistic soul that has influenced the entire world. There's no doubt that Vienna has been the home of many brilliant personalities, from Mozart to Klimt to Freud. So I'm curious, if you could have dinner with any one of them, who would it be and what would you want to ask them? Sound off in the comments section below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, you'll definitely love this next one.